We'll be looking at quite an important thing. I think it's important. Our blue economy, the marine and blue economy, maritime in Nigeria. How is that faring? And of course, other conversations. To stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Business Daily on Trust TV. And before the break, I told you we'll talk about certain things. But before we get there, Dr. Aliyu Ilias is my guest this morning, joining me in the studio. We'll have another person joining us virtually. Let's talk about former Governor Okalu's statement that debt's a necessity for us to run this country. If not, it's going to collapse. What's your take?
Right. I think to his own opinion, there's nothing bad. And ideally, if you look at the best and leading economy globally, they are most indebted country like Japan, country like USA, country like China.
China is indebted.
They are they are the highest. But the fact is that you can see the result
of the debt.
Those our own, right from before debt forgiven by Obasanjo that we're lucky to have, up to now, we have not actually seen the result of the debt. Perhaps if you see most of our debts are not project-tied loan, and that's our problem. If you look at the last one that was even proposed, we proposed to get a bond to pay for our pension. Is it pension or retiree?
Yes,
There's a way they call it.
7.25 pension.
Exactly.
Fund,
so
yes.
some of us thrown at that. How can you borrow for such? What is the economic value of such debt? And until we start having a project-tied loan, debt in itself is not bad, provided all the all the metrics actually work, debt to GDP, debt to revenue, all those permutations. If it actually work in our favor, debt is an opportunity for you to do now what you cannot do in the next 12 years. That's the advantage. But the way he was talking, it is as if we are tied on that debt. If we didn't borrow, we cannot grow at all. We can grow, but not at that level. So, and the one we have borrowed so far, what is the result? At least, let's even talk about Fourth Republic, right, from 1999 to present, 26 years, uninterrupted.
Yes.
And we have got a lot of debt. What can we say? And that's why some of us
and even at that time,
military,
the debts were cancelled. Some were forgiven
exactly,
and cancelled.
and now we are back to that level. Imagine if it was not cancelled. And that's why some of us argue that even during military era, we achieved projects much more compared to the civilian era.
So, but you said that tying the projects to the debts to projects, yes. The president is saying that this at least a 21 point something billion that he's wanting to ask for is for infrastructure, healthcare. That's already tied to some projects.
Right. Well, that's a good one, but it's beyond the rhetorics, because most of those budgets are still there, sometime to different things. Let me give you a quick example. Look at our budget. Our budget deficit is 13 trillion, right? And we are going to borrow 47 or thereabout trillion, if you bring it to Naira. So you now look at, is it part of the budgetary, capital project that they are going to put that, or separate budgets? So they need to come clear. Which way are you actually spending this money? So, and that's why when they are borrowing those money, we want to see them bringing it, I know black and white, that XYZ is for this. And that's why people like President Muhammadu Buhari, you have seen what he used the money to do in the railway system. So these are the things we want to see. And you can see our road that we are building in the coastal road.
Lagos.
You can see it's not even tied to borrowing. These are the things that I think you should try to, so that we can actually see.
Instead of having
in the long run, we can actually see the advantage. Sometimes you don't get, the project don't get to pay itself. But there's a way it helps citizens, the economy to actually, blossom, and thereby government will get more money. And just like the road we have at Benue is being towed. These are projects that we want. When you tow it, over time it will pay itself.
So basically what we're saying is not just giving a carte blanche a title.
You should say specify X, Y,
yes, we're taking this loan to build the railway system.
So that even NGOs and other people can actually monitor. Even the donor, the lender can actually monitor that, okay, this is actually what they use it to do. And you can see that China is still there managing the rail. Up till now, if you go there, you still see them managing it, to an extent before they will hand over. That's the kind of one that is better.
All right. Thank you for your insights on that issue of debt. Let's now go to the conversation. We're seeing analyzing the maritime and blue economy. Now, Nigeria's maritime and blue economy represents a significant but underutilized pillar of economic growth, with over 850 kilometers of coastline and strategic access to the Atlantic. The country has immense potential in maritime trade, fisheries, coastal tourism, marine transport, offshore offshore energy and blue carbon markets. In 2023, the sector contributed roughly 3% to Nigeria's GDP, but stakeholders argue that with the right policies, it could exceed $70 billion annually. The recent creation of the Federal Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy signals renewed government commitment to unlocking value from the oceans and inland waterways. Now, joining me is a maritime expert, Dr. Charles Okorefe. He is actually owns his own maritime economy and lectures in a university down in Delta State in the maritime course. Thank you so much for joining us this morning on Business Daily.
Thank you for having me, Chiamaka. If you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Now, you are the maritime expert.
Good.
Tell us generally the marine and blue economy in Nigeria. What's your take on it?
Well, it's a massive industry. If you want to have a holistic look of what it entails, you are talking about the riches of our oceans, our rivers, our lakes, okay, and our waters, generally speaking, and they hold a lot of offerings in terms of economic activities. But the question we want to ask is, how much are we doing to develop it and to reap the benefits that are embedded within it? Otherwise, I can tell you that the blue economy, our marine and blue economy, like you said in your introduction, Nigeria has a total coastline of about 852 coastline,
Yes.
and a labyrinth of about 4,000 kilometers of inland waterways. That is huge. Contain a lot of offerings in terms of oil and gas, fisheries, and aquaculture, biodiversity, and everything that goes with it. So we are blessed indeed. But the question is, where are we in terms of development of that sector?
Yes, so now this present administration created that ministry to look into it. That's the marine and blue economy. How far can you tell that they fared so far? 2 years now.
How far they fared? That is a huge question, Chiamaka, because I'm in the industry and I still look to see where we have been in the past 2 years. Some of us have been clamoring for a blueprint, what you call a policy direction, for this sector. And it is only about 2 weeks ago or thereabouts that the Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy came up with what they call a policy statement on that sector. So we are not talking about implementation of anything yet. You are just talking about the blueprint, the policy that is supposed to drive that sector. And don't forget, this government is in its mid-term already. Very soon, maybe by the end of this year, governance will recede for politicking. So when will this policy be implemented? So we have, like I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of offerings. You are talking about fisheries and aquaculture. You are talking about a renewable energy. You are talking about biodiversity. You are talking about developments of infrastructure in the marine sector. You see, the policy statement encompasses all this. But the question is, when will the implementation start? To my mind, we are a little bit behind time because we have a lot of issues to tackle as far as this new ministry is concerned. And I think we are a bit lagging behind, if you ask my candid opinion.
Okay, so you've talked about the vastness of the blue economy, but let's go down, hold it down to what affects most of us in this country: employment. What can we say when it comes to employment from the blue economy? Like, what is the employment potential from there? Away from me going to fisherman and doing I want to go and fish, what can, if the ministry factors into it, how would that impact our unemployment and underemployment rate in the country?
The employment opportunities are huge, very huge indeed, because you are looking at, look at even tourism alone, marine tourism alone. In December, you heard what they call dirty December in Lagos, isn't it? Much of it was driven by the coastline in Lagos, the beaches, okay? The hotels, the accommodations and all of that. And I recall that it was said about 13 billion naira was earned from that alone. This is just Lagos. And you are talking about 853 coastline miles, coastline of a nation. You have the littoral states from Lagos to Ondo, to Ogun, to Delta, to Edo, up to Cross River. Just imagine a deliberate attempt to develop marine tourism across these coasts. You are talking of employment across the board, even if it's for only hotel management alone, tourist guides, and all of that. Not to talk of other issues like we have also things like cruise, for instance. Have we thought about that? Can we create such a situation? Nigerians go abroad to enjoy cruise on cruise vessels. Who says that we cannot replicate such a thing in Nigeria? We have cruise ships, for instance, that employ about 4,000 to 5,000 crewmen on board a single vessel. So, if you have such replicated in Nigeria, marine tourism alone, I've not talked about fisheries. Nigeria is also blessed with ornamental fishes. Okay? We are blessed with a lot of varieties that are exportable. Seafoods, periwinkles, oysters, and so many of such that can be harvested, processed, and exported. These are huge areas of employment. How about sustainable energy? How about biomedical developments? These are huge areas, not only for research, but also for employment of labor. So the avenue is huge. And I think it will only take deliberate action by the ministry, to put together such not only personnel, but such expertise that is required to drive the offerings that the blue economy has to offer. It is huge. It is huge in terms of employment of labor and all other things that encompass it.
Okay. I'll be going to my guest in the studio. What do you have to say?
Right. At the inception of this administration, some of us were so we are jubilating because we saw 3 new ministries being introduced. We saw Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy, we saw Ministry of Steel, and we saw Ministry of this Dele Alake, Ministry of Solid Minerals. So we are so happy that, wow, this will bring a lot of employment, not knowing that it will not translate to what we actually expected. But I think, if you ask me, one thing I would talk about in this blue and marine economy, I wish NPA is not under blue and marine economy. There are some things that has to be strategic. You are starting it new, and you are giving them source already. It's somehow. So if it's purely, blue economy, and you now take MPA maybe to transport. You know, that would have.
But it's still part of marriage, because even
I agree, but you know, when you have another source and when you have something that is much more convenient for you, you know, the attention. You know, look at what our doctor just said now. It is just last 2 weeks they now bring policy. You know, how can you have new ministry? At least let's say 1 year, 6 months, and you just bring policy direction. Because if you look at the employment that we could generate from blue economy is quite huge. Countries like Tanzania, you know, a lot of them, that's what they tap into, and it brings a lot of employment opportunities. So I think that's another thing is sometimes some ministry need, especially when they are coming from reception, you need people that are experts to actually kickstart those ministries.
Yes, because I'm going to ask.
Imagine doctor now being the minister. You know, he is in the field. You know what to do, what to tap, how to tap. Look at, he has mentioned a lot of things, and these are another thing that we need to look at.
Because I was actually going to ask,
right?
Was the right person put in place to handle that ministry?
Right. You know, ideally, to have minister, he must not be an expert in that area.
But some deserve experts.
Some deserve experts, like I said. And, you know, beyond that, the directors, you know, all those people under him are supposed to be an expert that will, you know, activate. Because it's too slow for me to actually be. And in fact, just recently I asked somebody, I've never heard or see anything about blue economy. Yes. One day, I just batch into one of the economy newspaper and I saw Marine. I was so happy. I tried to read through. I say they are still at the point of what, you know, still plan. How can you be at the planning stage at this level? So I think that is where we expect much more employment. And like you rightly said, I can tell you that if we actually activate that area very well, you know, perhaps by now we'll have more employment. Maybe their focus is to build coastal road before they will not activate. But a lot of opportunity has been there already. Because if you go to Lagos, you know, Jet Sea, you know, a lot of things are happening in that area that they are supposed to take advantage. So I hope President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will beam his searchlight on that area to make sure that they achieve the aim. Because that 3 ministry, for me, they're supposed to be, you know, the new ministry that will generate much more employment.
All right. So, Doctor, let's come back to you as someone who is actually well versed in this sector, as a maritime expert that we're speaking with. Now, we know that there's equally the climate aspect of this, right? And it has its impact, because when we talk about it, we're talking about the oil. We know what has happened over the years. The people in Ogoni land, they keep complaining about the drillings and how it's affected the waters and the fish. And now even this fishery you're talking about seems to have been impeded by the whole, you know, oil and gas, sustainable energy from the waters. So how can we manage this? How can we manage this so that, you know, while we're earning from it, we're not destroying other things as well?
Very good. The blue economy is defined as the sustainable use of the ocean for economic purposes, while at the same time sustaining the livelihoods of the oceans. That is how the United Nations defines it. And you can find it under the MDGs, Millennium Development Goal number 14, which is life underwater. You know, it is clearly spelled out. It's not for you just to go. That's why we have, in some countries, we have areas that are restricted from fishing, for instance. You don't just go there every year to fish, okay? And we have such restrictions. You talked about oil destroying Ogoni land and all. Yes, those are the unsustainable use of the resources that we are talking about. You know, for us to get the juice from the ministry or from that economic sector, we must be very conscious, okay, of how we deploy our resources, okay, in trying to exploit what our seas and our oceans have to offer. So, now, I lecture at the Maritime University, Okorefe, in the Delta State. And you talked about climate change. Now, we have departments that cut across transport, environment, marine engineering, even climate change that you just mentioned now. Our minister has not deemed it fit to visit that institution, to even see what is on offering, to see how the intellectuals there can make their inputs to see how this ministry can run. We have experts in oceanography, climate change, and all others, including biodiversity. These are the people you need to give you a sound footing, okay, in terms of the running with your vision for the ministry. You know, like my colleague there rightly said, you see, when you create a new ministry like this, it should be peopled by those who have the nitty-gritty of what it is to run such a ministry. It's not just any ministry. It is a specialized one that is supposed to generate a lot of revenue for this economy. Okay. Take, for instance, what do you call it now? This wind-driven technology for power supply. What are we doing about such? The first time I visited the Netherlands in the 90s, I was shocked to see that these people derive their power through the windmills, which is everywhere you go. And this is as a result of the resources from the oceans, the seas. And we have it in abundance in Nigeria. What are we doing? Why should we up till now be starting up NEPA when we have natural resources that will drive power and energy for Nigeria? So I think we have everything that it takes in terms of following the SDG goal number 14. Okay. We have to handle all these issues sustainably, okay? Not just going there, for instance, to fish and destroying the coastlines, or exploiting oil and gas and destroying communities. No. That is against what the mandate of the United Nations says regarding the utilization of the oceans and its resources. Okay. We can fish, we can do coastal tourism, we can do everything, but everything has to be done sustainably so that the life of the ocean, because the ocean has its life. Yes. Don't forget that the entire world is about 75% water. We only have 25% dry land. So if we destroy the oceans, how do we survive? We cannot. All right, Doctor. So while utilizing the resources of the ocean, we must also be mindful of how to keep it safe from being destroyed and messed up. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Okorefe. We're going to be moving away from the blue and marine economy to, he preempted the conversation actually when he mentioned the other ministries that were put in place, the solid minerals, the steel development, and of course there's one too, the livestock development ministry. But we'll just look at solid minerals and steel. Maybe some other time we go into the livestock. Now, Nigeria holds over 40 types of solid minerals across 500 plus locations, including gold, limestone, coal, barite, iron ore, and lithium. Now, despite vast deposits, the sector contributes less than 1% to the GDP due to underinvestment, illegal mining, and regulatory gaps. What is delaying us from moving to mineral-rich economy to actually a mining-rich economy? Right. I think it's much more political will, because if you ask me, those things has been there and just need to be well tapped. And that's why I commended President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for even bringing about Ministry of Mining. And you could see that even most of us were thinking Dele Alake will end up in Ministry of Information because that's his expert. Yes, that's what he was. We are surprised that we see him at mining, but I can tell you he's doing well because he has actually instituted a mining corporation. But the thing is, how has it transited to benefit Nigeria in terms of income and employment? You know, the last one I followed was the Nasarawa State own. You know, they have lithium, and we could see some people are coming into today. I think we need to review our policy. Perhaps policy that said federal government is the owner of all mineral resources need to be over, actually reviewed. We can say 25% of it can go to states. You know, if states are the one to handle 25% of those natural resources, I can tell you by now, each state would have go back to look at how they can generate money from that area and actually make it
working. I recall the governor of Nasarawa was saying that because federal government owned the natural resources, so they had decided now to go and establish a company that was also registered with federal government and will tap the natural resources. That is quite commendable. So, and that's why we need to continue to look into those things, because we cannot continue, the state cannot continue cap in hand coming to federal government to seek money when you are sitting on gold, when you're sitting on lithium, when you're sitting on other mineral resources. So I think that thing needs to review, because if you look at Kogi State, to where we have Ajaokuta, imagine if some section of it belongs to the state would have looked at it. How do we generate internal revenue from this? But it has been there. Most of them are going moribund. Most of them are untapped. How can you have 40 natural resources and no one is being tapped? The other thing is what we call comparative economy. If you have gold in Nigeria, is it economical to actually mine the gold here, or is it economical to go to Ghana and buy and bring to Nigeria? These are the things we have to, because we have to look at economic part of it, why people are not investing in that area. So because of lack of infrastructure to actually mine those natural resources, you know, lack of enabling infrastructure discourage people. So people prefer to go outside, bring it in, you know, and come and sell it in Nigeria. So we must review that comparative advantage and taking advantage of it as it's expected. All
right, you've preempted the next one again when you went to Ajaokuta Steel, because we said that the president said his reason for creating the Ministry of Steel Development was mostly because of Ajaokuta Steel. Now this is 2 years, and you're actually from that state. Tell us if there's, you know, what you think, because we can't see anything happening there.
Right. If you ask me, I think what was his name, former Fayemi actually did more. You know, even then it was combined into ministry. So, but this man there, I don't still understand up till now what's actually did, because I could see that they actually appointed a DG about 3 weeks ago, DG mining or something in that area. For me, I think the president is not giving them a marching order. And that's what some of us said. The president has bring up KPI, key performance indicator, and has a SA admin. That woman, what was her name? I've forgotten her name, who is in charge of that. It's called these ministers. You know, if they are not doing well, let them go. If there isn't for expert, change them. After all, when we see Ministry of Trade and Investment was not doing what we expected, President changed the woman in ease of doing business, bring it to the ministry, and change the minister down to Minister of State for Finance. So these are the things you have to rejig and look at, put the appropriate people in the proper places, because that thing actually counts. If you put wrong persons in another where he cannot perform, it will be, you know, substandard. And that's why I will go back to President Obasanjo in his second term. Perhaps maybe Tinubu is waiting for second term to actually do that, because during Olusegun Obasanjo, he actually find his way of putting the right people at the right terms of affair, and it shows, because you remember the remember the Akunyi, remember Adeshiri, all of the Erifai, all of them were actually doing what they're supposed to do, simply because he went out of politics. Erifai was not a politician at that time. Akunyi was not a politician at that time, and he bring them in, serve Nigeria, and give us the right thing that we need. I think we need to get to be using the right people, and not political compensation.
Yes, and of course, you know, just as the country and everybody is vetting the president in his 2-year term, even the president should vet the people he has put in place at the midterm to say, what are your results? How far have you done in the last 2 years? That's what I believe you're saying. Now, let's just wrap it up. Dr. Okorefe, what's your last words?
My last word will be in accordance with what you have just said. Putting the right people in the right places, square pegs in square holes. This has been a major bane for Nigeria. It has been a major problem. You see, when you just I give you an example. Look at the Nigerian customs today. Bashir Adeni was brought in as the CGC of customs. This is somebody who has paid his dues through the ranks. He came in and hit the ground running. And today, if you look at the customs, that man has totally transformed that place. Why can't we replicate this kind of thing in other sectors, including the marine and blue economy? Because I'm one of those who shouted my voice hoarse for the Ministry of Transport to be balkanized as it was before now. And I was very glad when the Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy was created out of it. But I can tell you that I am not so sure of how I feel today with the way we're going.
Okay.
But I believe things will improve. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have to actually wrap it up here because the news is coming on shortly. Thank you so much for joining us on Business Daily this morning, Dr. Charles Okorefe, a maritime expert, and Dr. Aliyu Ilias, CSA analyst, development experts, and a lot of things. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. This morning, this morning we'll be looking at some of the sectors, some of the new ministries that President Tinubu put in place. How well have they done? Their impact on the economy. That's the much we have for you today on Business Daily. Same time, same place tomorrow. Don't forget to follow us on our social media platforms for more news, programs, and documentaries. I'm your host, Chiamaka Nwafor. Bye for now.